唔會見到啊？唔可以
遮住佢。
遮住用個袋。
冇事。
唔知喎。或者可以放入個袋度啩？今晚佢見到邊個喺度去
唔係咁嘅咩？信你。
但我驚遮住啲，遮住個音質。你講嘢，即係我可以大啲聲。要上班，但係好似我哋傾偈，跟住我打字好慢嘅，邊度上班啊？
自己嘢。
咁好。喺邊度啊？做咩
？design 嘢。
哦，哇，好好喎！即係好彈性咯，你啲時間可以，真係正。咁你點解會剔呢個課？
我想學呢個。
係有興趣？
呢個我啱啱 start 咗個公司啊嘛。
哦，係啊。咁好好喎！呢個真係有用咯。
係呢個咯，就係呢個。
定係呢個？唔係其他都有用嘅。做邊方面嘅 design？
好聽我哋講嘢。
唔緊要。
本身做product 啦，櫥窗設計嗰啲。
櫥窗設計。
即係你行街，你見到啲鋪頭。
即係嗰個叫做 display 嗰啲。
係啊係。
哦。所
以如果你有時你要結婚啊，要搞生日會啊，就可以揾我。
哦，係。
嗰啲都得㗎，都 OK 㗎。係啦，啱啱就係學緊咪 partnership 嘅，但係我唔係 professional 㗎嘛，咁所以我係 company 㗎，即係我有3個 part，即係加埋我3個人，但係我哋 share 啲嘢做嘅，因為我哋 friend 冇所謂。即係你可能我係做個 lift 嘅，我可以有埋 production 㗎，冇所謂嘅。我覺得唔貴咯，因為冇錢賺。
合理。
即係好似我啱啱我哋做利是封咯，而家開始咗做有一間同一間公司，我舊年都做咗嘅，咁今年又有。即係所以 printing 嘢係有嘅。可以慢慢傾。我冇啦，我有 IG。可以 at 我 IG，或者我 WhatsApp 我。你係咪都係我哋而家個呢個？好笑，佢哋話俾我聽。
唔好講嘢。聽到咯。
course.
有你自己攞得。 你搞錯㗎，20唔係20。One cast one。算好有啲讀完之後先知道報錯嘅，算走得快。佢都上咗堂先知，呢度唔係教account咁樣，正，好開心有啲咁嘅同學，讀到最後嗰堂先知道原來。答問題喎，上堂仲要識答嘢先好。好彩佢唔係呢度唔係中醫咁樣。Okay, we're back to class, right? So before the break, we learned that a partnership is a relationship. Remember, right? Relationship. So a partnership is not a human being, of course. The law defines that a partnerships, being a relationship with persons. Right? The plural form it means more than one. And a partnerships is not a separate legal entity, unlike a company. Right, something you're going to learn about starting from lecture 3. So this is not something being created, but we refer to a group of people, right? A group of persons. And we also learned that there are no rigid requirements on the formation of a partnership. It means that we have to consider some elements. If we have the elements here, then we have then we have a partnership, right? But we don't have one single conclusive evidence, like a company. Because for a company, if we can show the certificate of incorporations, then there's a conclusive evidence. If you have the marriage certificate, so that's a conclusive evidence to prove a marriage. To prove a boyfriend and girlfriend relationship, we have to consider the elements. And that would be something similar. If you want to prove a partnerships, the law says that you have to consider whether the parties, they are sharing the net profit. So you have to consider whether the party, they are sharing losses and profit. But still, right, still, not enough. They are not conclusive. Because we have to look for cases, remember, right? Remember, we are learning under the common law system. So all the definition of the statutes, or the written law, ultimately relying on the cases, relying on the interpretation from the court. So, what's the most important thing? In order to identify partnerships, the court held that, right? The court held that, based on the cases, the primary factor in the formation of partnerships is the contractual intention of the parties, right? Remember, contractual intention of the parties. It means the intention of the parties, whether the parties, they really want to form a partnership. So that's the most important thing, to be considered by the court. Right? So if the court believes that you really have the intention to form a partnership, then probably the court held that a partnership is really in existence. If you don't have the intention, then probably you don't have a partnership. So the test in determining the existence of an intention is not merely on the superficial expression of the parties. Remember, I told you last time, forms and substance, right? Forms and substance. What I mean by forms, what I mean by substance? In the common law system, we always concern the substance, but not the forms. Forms means the superficials. Apparently, right? Apparently, on paper, on papers. Substance, it means real things, what really happened. For example, employment relationship. If you sign an employment contract, then you have the forms of an employment. because you have a piece of paper being signed as an employee, right? But that's not the main concern in the law, because the court, they only consider substance. They don't care whether you really signed an employment contract. If you sign an employment contract, that will be good, and that will be considered by the court, right? But that's not the only thing to be considered by the court. The court considers substance. So whether you are taking instruction from your boss, whether you work under fixed hours, whether you are under the supervisions for someone, whether you get paid for a fixed salary, right? So the court considers the real things, substance, right? And that is the same for the court in order to understand intentions. Because the test in determining the existence of intentions is not merely on superficial expression of the parties. It means not the wordings not being written by the parties, but the true intention, right? What's really happening. Whether objectively speaking, that partnership has been created in the eye of law by referring to the requirements in the partnership ordinance. PO means partnership ordinance. So remember, right? The court will focus on the real intention of the party, but not the superficial expressions, and not the forms, but the substance, right? Forms and substance. Substance over form is a very important principle in common law. Because that is not the same in other jurisdictions, right? For example, in continental law system, sometimes the forms over substance. They don't care about the substance. They only care about the form, right? If you have the form, then you have it, right? If you don't have the form, you don't have it, right? Say like in mainland China, right, or in Macau, because Macau is using the law based on the Portuguese, right? But because they were a former colony of the Portuguese, so they used the European continental law system, but not the common law system. Right. So how to understand whether the parties, their real intentions in creating a partnerships? Of course, we have to look for cases, right? We have to look for cases. The first case. You haven't yet learned about contract law and the law of tort, right? That's what they call the law of obligation, right? You're going to learn about later. When you study contract law, and you know that almost 90% of the time, you have to learn from cases, because there are not much statutes, not much written law in governing the contract law, right? It means when you want to conclude a contract in Hong Kong, so most of the time you base on legal principle from cases, right? So there are hundreds of cases. By comparing with contract law and company law, we don't have that much cases, right? But we still have some cases, because company ordinance itself, I mean, it covers almost everything, right? The company ordinance itself is in great details. It covers all the different areas for company practice, right? But in contract law, most of the time, you just deal with cases, because we don't have a statute. We don't have an ordinance in Hong Kong that we call a contract law ordinance, and we don't have it, right? So 90% of the time, when you handle contractual disputes, you rely on cases. Okay, the first case, in order to understand the true intentions. So what happened here? Two parties, right? They intend to form a company to run their food business. Right? They want to do a food business. So prior to the incorporations, so one of the parties, right? They have a family name Bishop. I don't know why, but anyway. So one of the parties orders certain goods and asks the supplier to deliver them to the premises to Mensa, another person, right? So one person, they work together. They want to run the food business. So one party orders some food and asks the supplier, you deliver the goods, to another person, right? That person is my partner, right? Working with me. So Bishop did not pay, and the supplier tried to sue Mensa by arguing that they were in the partnerships. So that person didn't pay, right? Didn't settle the payments. Then the seller wanted to argue that, oh, come on, right? You guys are partner. You have a partnership here because you work together, right? You run a business. You are aiming for profit. So you have a partnership. So you have a partnership means that, so both of you shall be responsible for the payment So that's the argument from the seller, right? So that's the argument from the seller. But the court disagreed, right? The court disagreed. The court held that there was no partnerships, as the parties only intended to form what? Company. And what they did were merely preparatory work for the subsequent incorporations, because the party can show the evidence to the court that they already have all the documentation regarding the incorporation of a company. The company is not yet incorporated, but the documents are already here. Do you remember that? As I told you, the most important thing is the real intention of the parties, right? If they really want to form a partnerships, then probably the court ruled that you have a partnerships. But in this case, because of the documentation, right, from the parties, and they can persuade the court to believe that they never want to have a partnership. They want to have a company. Right? All the documentation already here. So if the corporation not yet being incorporated, no company. And because they never want to have a partnership, so they don't have a partnership. So it means that you cannot sue another guy. You just sue that person who ordered from you. All right? So that's the first case in order to understand what I mean by intention. So let's take a look at another case. So another person, right? Correct. So want to invest in a project, business project. So he did not have enough fund, so he asked Chen to invest in this proposed business. So I want to run a business project, but I'm not having enough money, right? So Mr. Chen, can you also invest? Are you interested to invest in my business project, right? You can invest $1 million, $2 million. So we can later on share the profit. So the parties signed an agreement which stated that they would cooperate for the project by opening a bank account and to share the profit and losses equally. The parties expressly excluded the formation of a partnership. And then the business later on was in financial difficulty. Well, there are some important information here, right? You have to be careful. Number one, the parties signed an agreement which stated that they would cooperate for the project, opening a joint bank account to share the profit and losses equally, and then try to record the definition of a partnership. I know you still remember the definition of partnership. Share profit and share net profit, right? Share losses and profit. Business in common. Person, profit, right? So think about all these elements. Do you think what happened to the case of Grant? And then think about this case again. All right? Think about this case again. Do you think that they have all the elements in order to prove the existence of a partnership? Yes or no? How do you think? How do you guys think of it? So how many of you think that the answer is yes? Raise your hand. No one. 兩個咁少. How about the others? Any of you think no? All right. You think about all the elements here, right? But the law defines that when you share profit, when you share the net profit, when you share profit and losses, when you have a common goal, right? When you aim for money, then at least preliminary, it seems like this case are having all the elements regarding a partnership. All right, so my answer is yes, all right? All the elements are here, but you have to consider one thing. Sorry, this case, this case. One thing, the parties expressly excluded the formation of a partnership. But something very interesting, right? Even with all the elements here, that's why I understand why you say no, because I showed the wrong page, right? I'm sorry. Okay. All right, so we have all the elements here. They cooperate, right? A joint bank account, share profit and losses equally. So it seems like we have all the elements of a partnership. But one thing, the parties expressly excluded the formation of partnership. Do you think this statement will have any impact regarding to the court decision? It means that because they sign agreement, right? They sign agreement. So I mean, on the one hand, they sign agreement stating that they work together with a common purpose. They aim for profit. They have a joint bank account. They share profit and losses together. So all the elements of partnership here, but they have another statement saying that they don't want to have a partnership. They are not having a partnership here. They make it clearly they are not having a partnership. How do you think? Do you think this statement will have any impact regarding the decision of the court? Why is it so important? Because the problem is that if a partnership already existed, then Chen would need to bear the external liability, right? If a partnership is here, then Chen is also one of the partners. So when this whole thing in financial difficulty, then Chen need to be responsible for the liabilities. If a partnership is not here, then Chen was only a lender, right? It means Greg borrowed the money from Chen, and Chen will not be responsible for any external liabilities, right? So whether partnership really existed is something really important to Chen, right? But my question is, it seems like we have all the elements, but the parties, they drafted a statement expressly to exclude the formation of a partnership. Do you think that this statement will have any impact to the decision of the court? Do you remember this principle? Substance over form. 應該位置調轉而家咁，right? Substance over form. What I mean by substance over form? The court consider what actually happened, but not the superficial expressions of the parties. We take a look at the judgment from court. The court held that there existed a partnership, you see, right? Partnership existed. Why? The rationale behind that the court looked at the substance of the agreement, the real things, what really happening here, regardless of the wording used, right? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Because the court always considers substance, but not the form. The court decision was based on the fact that the parties share the risks and profit, which according to Section 4 of the Company Partnership Ordinance, shall be regarded as evidence on the existence of partnership. So the court held that all the elements here, I don't care about the superficial wordings being used by the parties, because the court always considers substance, but not the form, all right? So what are the legal implications from this case? Number one, the existence of a partnership is a question of fact, right? So we always need to consider the whole circumstances, because we don't have one single conclusive factor. Unlike a marriage, unlike a company, if you want to prove the existence of a company, you can ask for one thing, and that's the certificate of incorporation. If you want to prove a marriage, you only need to have a marriage certificate, and that's all, right? That is conclusive. You cannot argue with it inside. You cannot argue that they are no longer in love, right? Even they are having the marriage certificate, but they are in substance, not in love. No, we don't have such an argument. Because for marriage, a marriage certificate, legally, that would be enough, right? If you think about it from the legal perspective, not from a psychological perspective, right? So that's another matter. If you are a counselor, then they are no longer in a marriage, right? Because they are not emotionally, right, in love. But from a lawyer, I don't care, all right? You have the certificate, then you are a married person. Second one, the court will look at the substance rather than the form. Something I already explained to you. I hope that you bear in mind always, right? Because that's a very important principle in common law. In Hong Kong, in other common law jurisdictions, right? Or even in UK, New Zealand, Australia, so something similar. Whenever you use the common law system, so this principle will prevail. And sharing of profit and losses will be a crucial factor, of course. Right? That is very important. By sharing profit and losses between the different parties will be a very important characteristic to be identified in a partnership. Because that is not something required in a company. Right? In a company, it doesn't mean that you have to share the profit and losses with the other shareholders or with the directors. Right? Or for a sole proprietor, as a sole proprietor, you handle everything by yourself, right? You don't share anything with anyone. So only in a partnership that you share profit and losses with the others. So the court held that sharing of profit and losses will be a very crucial factor, right? Something really important. So you have to be careful. So when you are doing something with the others and you are sharing profit and losses, then probably you are already found a partnership, even you don't are aware of it. All right? So that is that may be good or bad, right? But that is our legal system. So I mean, on the one hand, that may be confusing, because sometimes, based on the judgment here, so sometimes you form the partnership, but you're never aware of it, right? You don't know that you have a partnership, because you drafted an agreement, and you expressly excluded the formation of partnership. But the court still ruled that you have a partnership, all right? So that will be confusing. But the good thing is that may be fair. It's a real justice, because the court ignore the forms. The court always consider what's actually happening, right? So how about the formalities in foreign partnerships? How about formalities? Same, right? Same. Something very similar to a sole proprietor. Because there's no system to register partnership. So not even to register the name. So apart from the PR side. So the same, of course, right? So the only formalities, the only thing that being required, no matter you run your business as a sole proprietor or partnerships or company, if you are running a business, right, business in nature, then the only thing you need is a PR cert, and that's all. But we don't have a system to register partnership, right? Remember, we don't have it. We only, if you form a partnership, you only need to get a PR cert, that's all, right? And that's all. But that's not the case for a company, right? Later on, you're going to learn about a company, because we have a very, good system to register a company, and you can do something we call a company search, in order to find all the information related to company, right? So that's always you can done online, right? You can do it in the common registry, or you can do it at home, to pay by credit card just around $20 or $30. But you can do the company search by look for a name of a company, to look for all the details of a company. But we don't have a system to register a partnership, right? We don't have it. So the only formalities, again, PR cert. There are also no legal restriction in naming a partnership. No, right? We don't have any rules. We don't have any law regarding the name of a partnership, because you can name your partnership. So unlike a sole proprietor, when you run your business as a sole proprietor, you use your own name, right? Edward Tong practice as a barrister, as a sole proprietor. So just my name, right? So I don't have a business name here. I don't have to. But for a partnership, you can have a name, right? You can think about it. They have a name. Richard Butler is a very famous law firm in Hong Kong, right? A City International law firm, right? And you really can find a lawyer, solicitor in the firm being called as a Richard Butler, right? Because Richard Butler is the name of that firm. I don't know, maybe a founder. But anyway, we don't have any legal restrictions in naming the partnerships. So many partners, they simply combine their own surname or to use some other names of their partnerships. But anyway, if you adopted the name of your partnerships and being registered under the BR side, that name can be sued in a high court. It means that, right? It means that if you formed a partnership, Chan Lee Wong CPA, right? Then that name can be sued in case of, something wrong happened. Then someone can sue you with that name. Then all the partners will be sued in court, right? So the partner may even include a name company, but don't mix up with a corporate body, right? A company doesn't mean a company, the third vehicle, no. But they can use the name company, but actually they are only a partnership. But they cannot use limited or 有限公司 in Chinese, right? But that may be an offense. So we have a name like this. It's a very famous local solicitor firm in Hong Kong, right? So probably, maybe the one with the longest history, I guess, because the Li here, right, Li Gong, he worked with Li Ka-shing for a very long time, right? So this firm almost handle all the cases under the Chang'an Group, right? Especially for property transactions. So Wu, Quan, Li, and Lo, it means the partners use the surname to name their partnership, all right? And another law firm, Fok, Guan, and Company, they are not really having a limited company. Because Fok, Guan, and Company actually is a partnership. Right? So they can use the name company, but they are not really a limited company, right? But they can include the name company here. It means they are, operating or running a business, something like that. Because we don't have any rules regarding the name of the partnership, right? Except that they cannot use company limited, and they cannot use 有限公司 in Chinese, right? So that's the only requirement here, right? They cannot use company limited. So other than that, there are no, no legal restriction in naming their partnership. So they can just combine the surname, or they can just have any name they like, right? Even for the name company, all right? Okay. So let's talk about some of the special features of a partnership. By comparing with a sole proprietor, so I would say like this, right? For a sole proprietor, and then partnership, and then a company. So this one, sole proprietor, with the simplest. Then this one, a little bit more complicated, and the company, even more complicated, right? So this very simple one, a little bit more complicated, very complicated, something like that. First, we think about the status of the partnerships. Number one, so there's no separate legal personality. So very important. But you know that, right? You know that. When you are having a partnerships, you have more than one person. So at least two, at least. So unlike a sole proprietor, in the case of sole proprietor, I'm sure that you only have one person, right? So barrister, doctor, right? Architect, so only one person. So you have a group of people here, right? 2 or 3 persons here. But you don't have a separate legal personality. It means that you are not creating anything to separate from this group of people. So the partnership has no independent existence from the partners. The partners trade collectively as a firm, and they are legally the same. What it means? John, Mary, right? Cindy. They form a partnerships as a JMC solicitors. So this a partnership, right? So we have a partnerships here. Of course, this is not sole proprietor because there's more than one party, right? More than one parties. But the JMC solicitor, it actually refers to this group of people as a group. And that's all. So JMC solicitor is not something separate. It's not something independent being created by the 3 parties here. The name here is just a collective calling for the 3 parties here. You get my point? For example, I'll give you another example, right? you have some friends here, right? First one is Edward, right? Another one is John, and then Peter, right? They have a great passion in studying law, right? They enrolled in all the courses offered by Hong Yu's space, right? So they call themselves as Hong Kong U Space Law Brotherhood, right? So it's something like a partnerships, but this thing is just a name collectively for the three parties here. But this name is not an independent existence from the three parties. Do you get my point here? So that will not be the same case if the three parties, they formed a LLB company, right? If they formed the LLB company, then the LLB company limited is something separate in law from the three different parties. This is not a collective calling for the three parties, but in law, they are shareholders, and this is a company. Even the company being owned by the three parties, but they are in law separate, right? They are different parties. When you sue the company, you are not suing the shareholders. When you sue the shareholders, you are suing the shareholders, you are not suing the company. But they form a partnership, being called as Hong Yu Space Law Brotherhood. So this is not a separate entity, because this is a partnership. This is only a name collectively in describing the three parties here. So when you sue Hong Kong U Space Law Brotherhood, then you are suing the three parties. When you are suing the three parties, then you are suing Hong Kong U Law Space Brotherhood, right? So that's the status of a partnership, right? Remember that. So any of you work in this law firm? No one? I'm sure some of you were in the law firm, I guess, right? No one? Any of you were in Valley Law? No one? Right. But this firm is not very good, right? So they instructed me before, but the legal fees they pay is terrible. This is shame, right? So I have to, to ask you a question first, right? To see any of you were in the law firm, right? I'll make sure no one is working in the law firm, right? Before I tell you something bad about the solicitor here, all right? So that because I'm a lawyer, right? I'm always being careful, prudent, right? Always being prudent. Okay. So the first one regarding the status, right? Always remember, the partners they trade collectively as a firm, but they are legally safe, right? They are not separate. So the partnership, the name of the partnership is only a collective calling of this group of person, right? Of this group of people. Another one, agency, right? Or something you learned in lecture one, remember, right? Agency. You have to know agency, even you don't have a question directly on exam. Why? Because I told you already, the concept of agency will be related to partnership and company. Okay, so let's deal with agency. A partner is an agent of the partnership as well as all the other partners, based on Section 7 of the Company Ordinance. Right? Very important. So what I mean by a partner, what I mean by agent, you already learned it. When someone being appointed to act on behalf of another person, right? That person is an agent, or agency being created. It means that you authorize someone to do something on behalf of you. So anything being concluded by that person, your agent, will be binding to you as a principle, right? That's what we learned in lecture one. And the law state that, partial ordinance state that a party is an agent of the partnership as well as all the other partners. So every single partner is an agent of all the other partners and the partnership as a whole, all right? So that is the law. The law state that, right? So it means that all the contracts concluded by the other partners, if you have a law firm here, then all the partners, when they sign a contract, then that contract may also be binding to all the other partners. Right? So you have to be careful. Because the law states that. So contract made by the partner with an outsider will be binding on the partnerships and all the other partners. So therefore, the firm and the partner shall bear the same extent of liabilities for any wrongful act or omissions. Of course, in the ordinary course of business of the firm. You and me, we're in the same law firm, right? You're also a partner, I'm a partner. So all the contract you signed, because you're a partner, in the ordinary course of business, anything related to law, legal service, we bind into the partnership and to all the other parts, including myself, right? But of course, that's only in ordinary course of business. If you sign a contract to buy some handbag from Gucci, from Hermes, right? You know all the evil names, very expensive, handbag, right? I'm being forced by my girlfriend to buy one, so a terrible experience. I still remember. I can sue this company for free. Okay. But if you conclude a contract because you buy a handbag, because you buy a cell phone, that's not in the ordinary course of business, and that will not be binding to other partners or to the partnership, right? You get my point here. Because you are supposed to be the agent of all the other partners and the partnership and all, but only in the ordinary course of business. It means when that contract related to the main practice of your partnership, but not every contract, right? If you buy some red wine, if you buy a handbag, if you buy a smartphone, that kind of contract will not be binding to a partnership, of course, right? Say if there's a law firm and means only contract related to legal service will be binding, all right? Liability, very important. Right? Liability, very important. So a partner assume first, right? Number one, unlimited liability incurred by the firm on a joint and several basis in the ordinary course of business, according to Section 11 of the Partnership Ordinance. Number one, unlimited liability. What do you mean by unlimited liability? It means there's no ceiling, no limitation regarding the risk you will be exposed to. So you can be sued by the outside party. You can be sued by, anyone, right? Regarding your practice for $100, $1,000, $5,000, $1 billion, $2 million, $1 billion, $10 billion, unlimited, right? No ceiling. Number one. Number two, even more terrible. You'll be liable for unlimited liability on the joint and several basis. What I mean by joint and several? It means the partners, they jointly liable. It means together, they're liable. And also individually liable to everything. So I'll give you an example here, right? I'll give you an example. We look at example, say, if the partnership incurred a debt for $100, right? 100. So suppose there are four partners, A, B, C, D. Right? We have four partners here. And then we have A, B, C, D, we have four partners. So what I mean by jointly liable, each of them responsible for the debt, proportionally, right? So each of them 25, easy to understand, right? That's what we call as jointly liable. Then what we mean by severally liable. For example, right? For example, because A, B, and C, they learned about the debt for $25. Maybe that's not 25, right? 25 million, right? $1 million. So they all kill themselves, right? They commit suicide, right? They all kill themselves. Right? They kill themselves. Right? They kill themselves. So the only surviving partner is D, right? Because A, B, C killed themselves already. Do you think that D, in this case, still responsible for $25? I'm sorry, that's not the case, right? D responsible for everything. Right? If the other partners, they are not capable to settle that. Do you get my point here? So jointly liable, proportionally, severally liable. Even they are not get killed, they are not committing suicide, maybe they bankrupt, right? It means when they cannot settle the debt, then the remaining partners responsible for everything, all right? 所以死係解決唔到問題。So killing yourself cannot solve the problem. You should seek for help from a lawyer, right? Find a good lawyer. Okay. So apart from the status, right? The status or the characteristics of the partnerships, the partnership ordinance also imposed something in the partnership, right? Imposed it, right? Imposed it. It means the law states that there's something must exist in the partnership, right? For example, right? For example, in section 26, the partnership ordinance, PO means partnership ordinance, impose certain right on the partners, right? Certain right,權利, right, on the partners. Number one, the partners, they can share the profit and losses equally. Simple, right? So every partner, they can take part in the management, right? Yes, good, right? The introduction of a new partners requires the consent of all the partners. Well, that's always a requirement. You think about if you want to work in a CPA firm, a solicitor firm, or in a partnership for the architects, before they admit a new partners, they need to have approval for every single existing partner. All right? That's a requirement. Because if you think about the nature of the partnerships, because when a new partner joins your firm, remember the law states that every single partner is an agent of the partnerships and all the other partners. So you better to know that person very well, right? But if that person is someone, always looking for trouble, always creating trouble, then the whole firm or every other partners, you also get into the trouble. So you better find a very, normal person, right? So the business of a partnership may be decided by a majority of the partners, but no change of the partnership. All right. So all of these things, right, they are rights imposed by the partnership ordinance. So it means that the law says that, right? If you have a partnership, then you have to follow section 26. Then all the partners, they have the right stated here, right? And apart from the right, the partnership ordinance also imposes obligation on the partners. So what are the obligations? A right and obligation, right? 權利義務. You have right, then you have obligation, and you have obligation, then you are entitled to the right. So what are the obligations here? Of course, number one, utmost good faith, right? You need to have good faith. You always need to think about the best interests of the partnerships and other partners. And that's something we call fiduciary duty, something I mentioned to you last time in the previous lecture regarding the duty of an agent, right? Because as agents, you own fiduciary duty to your principal. And you are going to deal with this term again when you're studying company law. Very important, right? So something like the best interest, right? Best interest. You always need to think about the best interest of your principal. You have to render your accounts. It means true accounts, the full information, common sense stuff. The partners must disclose the account and not to hold any secret profit, right? Something you learned it. Do you remember agent, right? Agents. As an agent, you cannot hold secret profit. Because as a partner, you are also an agent of the other partner. So the same principle here. And no competitions. Another one, because that's also because out of good faith. When you are working in the partnerships, when you are a partner, then you should not join another competing business with the same nature. Right? If you want to do so, you have to disclose. But that is not a requirement, say like for a company or as a shareholder, right? If you hold the shares of HSBC, it doesn't mean that you cannot hold the shares of Bank of China. It doesn't mean that you cannot hold the shares of Citibank, right? If you hold the share of HSBC, it doesn't mean that you cannot join another bank, which is a competitor of HSBC. Because that's not a requirement for a company, right? No. But for a partnership, you run the partnerships, you cannot join the rival at the same time, right? If you're working in Fort Guan, Wu Guan Law is a rival of Fort Guan, then you cannot also work in Fort Guan as a partner because they are competing, right? Okay. So once again, we learned a lot regarding the rights of the partners imposed by the law. We learned about the obligations of the partners imposed by the law. Well, it always happens when you're studying law. It means on the one hand, you learn a lot of legal principle, right? So you feel very powerful, right? Because you learned a lot of legal principle. But then you will be disappointed very soon, because you are going to learn about exception. It means on the one hand, there are a lot of legal principles. They are prevailing, right? They will govern many different scenarios. But then later on, you are going to learn some principle. And actually, all these principles, they are rebuttable, right? Sometimes they can ignore. And that's what happened in partnerships. Because on the one hand, the partnership ordinance imposed rights and obligation on the partnerships and on every single partner. But remember, right, the rights and obligations in the partnership ordinance are indeed rebuttable. What I mean by rebuttable? 可以推翻, right? It means you can ignore that. Well, actually, it depends, right? It depends. But rebuttable. I'm not saying that it's not applicable, but rebuttable. Rebuttable. It means they are subject to amendment or exclusion by the parties in their own agreement. You have to remember the very nature, as I told you, a partnership, the very core of partnerships is contractual intention. So it means ultimately a partnership is based on a contract, what being agreed between different partners, right? So that's the core, that's the fundamental, that's the root of the partnerships. So all the right and obligation I mentioned in page 22 and 23, they're actually rebuttable. It means they can be amended or they can be excluded by the partner's own agreement, right? For example, right? For example, you say that the introduction of the new partners require the consent of all partners, but you can drop a partnership agreement and saying that the introduction of a new partners only need to be approved by the equity partner, but not all the partners, because we have different kinds of partners. If you want a partnership, whether you want to talk about accelerated partner, right? Equity partner, because we have different partners. So the requirements here can be amended by the own agreement of the parties, right? And it also means that for the sake of prudency, right, you always need to have this kind of attitude if you are in the legal professions. It would be advisable for the parties to draft their agreement carefully in order to avoid certain undesirable sections to be imparted and to be included in the partnership, because the law imposed something regarding the right and obligation, right? They are imposed, it means they are imposed, they are here. Of course, you can exclude it, you can amend, but if you don't exclude all the right and obligations, and you don't amend all the right and obligations, then they're supposed to be existed in your partnership, all right? So when you form your partnership, you have to be careful, because some of the right and obligation may not be suitable, in your case, right? If that's not suitable, make sure that you drop your own partnership agreement to exclude it or to amend, right? To change it. But also one thing very important, so only the part concerning the right and obligations of the partners can be excluded or amended. The relevant sections regarding external parties cannot be changed. Very important, right? So don't mix up. You only have the right to change the internal matters, but everything related to the outside parties can never be amended. For example, the liability, Section 11. Section 7, the presumption of agency. They related to external parties. Anything related to external parties cannot be amended by the internal parties. Do you get my point here? When you form partnerships, you form under a partnership agreement of your own. The law imposed right and obligation, and you can change the right obligations. You can change, but you can change the right an obligation related to the internal management. So anything which get in touch with the external party or the third parties can never be changed, right? So that is something, must exist. So normally, right, remember, our partnerships depends on a partnership agreement. So when you have a partnerships, again, normally, you drop a partnership agreement, something like this, right? Something like this. But that will not be extended, don't worry too much, right? But I want to show you, how it looks like. And one more thing, right? One more thing. A partnership agreement as a contract is not necessarily to be written, right? Because written, black and white, in written form is not a requirement in law, in contract law, regarding the validity of a contract, right? There's never a requirement in contract law in saying that if you want to have a contract, it must be in written form. That's not a requirement, except for some kind of contract. For example, in conveyancing, when you're buying or selling the properties, then it must be in written form. When you have a tenancy agreement, it must be in written form because you have to pay stamp duty, right? You pay right? Because you have to pay stamp duty, so it must be in written form. When you're buying and selling property conveyancing, then it must be in written form. But unless for this kind of contract, so normally, right? Normally, there's not a requirement in contract law that your contract must be written. No, right? We don't have such a requirements. Okay, so a few more pages, then we end the class today. Simple, right? Simple. Common sense stuff. Advantages of partnerships. So partnerships relatively easy to set up, and starting cost is low. The initial cost can be shared by several parties. Well, this is by comparing with the company, I guess, right? By comparing with the company. But when you form a company, there are a lot of formalities you have to do. You have to fill in some forms, you have to pay the fees. But remember, when you want to form partnerships, that's all only based on contractual intentions. So how to start? I mean, initiate your business as a sole proprietor, nothing, right? Because you can run your business as a sole proprietor immediately, right? But for a partnership, at least you need to have two persons. But again, you don't have any formalities. Well, the court already held that ultimately it's based on contractual intention. So we have two ladies here and Edward, right? We want to form a partnership, and we can do it immediately, right? So that will be relatively easy, especially by comparing with a company, right? And then the workload and the burden can be shared among the parties. And the partnership may benefit from the knowledge and skills and the collective decision-making of the partners. You think about definition of partnerships. A partnership is a group of people work together with a common purpose. So they work for one thing, right? They work for one thing. So you think about by comparing with the sole proprietor, well, that is totally an advantage. As I told you before, as a sole proprietor, as a barrister, when I handle a case, I handle everything by myself. And for a law firm, they're also offering legal service, but they can handle everything with a team. And that's allowed. Because when a client engage a law firm, then you engage a partnership, right? So they don't have to ask for your permissions before the work being shared with different partners or with the other assistants, because you engage with a partnership, and you know that partnership means a group of people, right? More than one. So you can always take advantage with the teamwork for partnerships. And the partnership has a flexible structures. Why? I told you already. The law imposes, some rights and obligations regarding the operation of partnership, but almost all the internal management can be amended or excluded by the parties. It means you always have the right to change the internal stuff, right? But that's not the case for a company. For sole proprietorship, we don't have such a concept because the sole proprietor is only one person. We don't have a structure here, right? We don't have a system. But for a partnership, we have a system. Because when we have more than one person, then we need to have a system. But for a company, right? For a company, we have the board of directors, we have the shareholders, and then the structures of the board of directors, the structure of the shareholders of the general meeting are being governed by law, and you cannot change. But for the partnerships, all the internal matters can be amended by the partners, can be amended by the different parties here, right? Number one, financing may be easier. Well, that's a very interesting point. Say like by comparing with a company. When you have a company, right, when you form a company with a limited liability, when the outside party sign a contract with a company with limited liability, they understand that if anything wrong, they cannot sue the owners, they cannot sue the shareholders, they cannot sue the directors, they can only sue the company limited, right? If that company only have $1, well, that may be the case. The company only have $10. If you sign contract with a company limited and without much asset, then that contract, even that contract is valid, but you are not being very well protected. Because you know that even you can sue that company, you get nothing from that company, right? But if you sign a contract with a partnership, so sometimes you're having a better protections. Because number one, you know that for partnerships, they have unlimited liability. It means they cannot limit their risk, unlike a company, right? Number two, I sign a contract with the partnerships. You are the one to sign on behalf of the whole partnership, right? And there are many different partners. So all of them are wealthy. You are not so wealthy, right? But it doesn't matter, because I know that based on the partnership ordinance, when you sign a contract, in the ordinary course of business, you are representing all the other partners and the partnership as a whole. So even you are not so wealthy, right? If I sue you, you don't get money to, to pay the compensation. But I know that because when you sign on it, all the partners will also be liable, and the other partners, they are very wealthy. So in that sense, I will be better protected. All right? Then how about the disadvantages? No. Number one, and the most terrible one is unlimited personal liability, something you already learned. Number one, we don't have a ceiling. Right? There will be no maximum. We're exposed to all the unknown risks, and also the basis, which is jointly and severally liable. It means we can never escape from it. Right? Terrible. Think about it, right? Jointly and severally, proportionally. But if any partners they bankrupt, right? They committed suicide, right? They run away, they're responsible for the whole thing. So that will be terrible, right? So the biggest risk is being a partner is unlimited personal liabilities. Number two, so partnership has no separate legal entity. So all the assets of the firm can only be owned by the partners, but not under the name of the firm. So the affairs will be mixed up. Right, I explain to you, if I form a company, right? I form a company, so this is a company. I can put this asset here. I can put this asset here. I can also take it out. So in case anything wrong with this company, right? This table is a company. So I can control the asset involved in the business transaction. So a company is a separate legal entity. If I'm not injected investment on it, if I'm not injecting cash on it, this company has nothing, right? So anything wrong with this company, we have nothing to do with my pocket, right? With my cash, with my watch here, right? Nothing, because the company is separate. But then you think about a partnerships, right? A partnership being formed by the partners, and there's no separate legal entity. So the asset under my own name will be affected by the operation of the partnerships. If the partnership being sued, so in case I need to pay compensations, a huge sum of money, then my personal asset will also be involved, right? You get my point here. But that's not the case for a company. Because for a company, the asset of the company is the asset of the company. The asset of the company is not your asset. Your asset is not the asset of the company. Even you own the company, right? They're separate. But for a partnership, everything makes sense. So that's it. Normally, not very good, right? This one. So every partner is an agent of the firm and other partners. So you have to think about risk management. It's a very important concept in nowadays business operation, right? We are always talking about risk management. You have to control the risk being exposed to. So that will be, quite troublesome in the partnerships. Because whenever you have a new partner, the law assumes that that new partner can be an agent of other partners in the partnership at all. And you cannot change, right? Remember, external relationship. You can only change internal relationship, but you can never change external relationship. So risk management will become a problem, right? For partnerships. Last one. The administration of partnerships is more troublesome and confusing. Because the partnership is based on mutual trust and cooperation. So decision always being made collectively, but unlike company, it does not have a key decision-making mechanism. When you form a company, and then you have the board of directors, don't worry, right? You will learn about all the details. You have the board of directors, 董事局. You have the shareholders, 股東. You have the general meeting of the shareholders. You have the company secretaries. You have different way to vote in the meeting. So all of them are being very well divided by law. And even for internal management. So most of the regulation, right, regarding the internal management cannot be changed. So the management structures and the mechanism will be relatively clear. So you understand the operation of the company, because almost all the companies, they are the same. But for partnerships, except for the external relationship that you cannot change, almost all the internal management can be changed or excluded by the parties. So sometimes that will be confusing, right? So one more thing, right? One more thing. Change of partners and liability. Well, you know that because liability is something really serious to a partner. So you have to understand very well the timing regarding your liability. So the general principle is that the partner shall be liable for any events incurred when he's one of the partners. So it will be something like this. Right? So if Peter is a partner of this firm in 2018, right? Say like for the whole years. If anything happened, liability happened in 2017, do you think that Peter will be responsible for this liability? Yes or no? No, right? No, because Peter only responsible for everything happened in 2018. At that time, when he was a partner, right? So anything happened in 2019, do you think Peter will be liable? The answer is no, right? Because Peter resided on December 2018. It means Peter was a partner only in 2018. So anything happened after his resignation will have nothing to do with Peter. Anything happened before Peter joined the partnerships will have nothing to do with Peter. So the only thing mattered to Peter will be the time when he was a partner. Right? So anything happened in 2018 from January to December, then Peter will be liable. Right? So that's the general principle. You understand, right? But one thing I have to remind you, do you remember something we call as apparent authority? Right. Do you remember partnership? Do you remember agency? We learned about apparent authority. What I mean by apparent authority, it means that when something always happened, and then the third parties assume that you are having authority to do something, then that will still be binding to the principle. For example, I authorized my assistants to negotiate the interest rate with the bank regarding my fixed deposit, right? So this lady has been authorized to do the same thing for 15 years. So apparently, to the bank, right? To the bank, he's a banker. To the banker, she is having apparent authority to handle the negotiations of interest rate of my bank account, right? So you have to be very careful because this concept related to a retired partner. So even a partner retired on the December 2018. So anything happened in 2019, suppose to have nothing to do with Peter, right? But you have to think about apparent authority. You have to think about apparent authority. If Peter had been working as a partner, not for 1 year, but 10 years or 20 years, so even Peter decided, you have to be careful, right? You have to be careful because of the concept of apparent authorities. When someone being allowed to do something for a very long time, so even that relationship being terminated, but the third party may not learn about it. It means the partnership may still be binding with everything being done by Peter, even in 2019 or even in 2020, right? So you have to be careful. Say like, I told you last time, to post advertisements in your website, in the magazine or in the newspapers, and tell everyone that this person already resided from my firm, right? Something like this. Okay, 2 more pages, then we end the lecture today. So how to dissolve the partnerships? Of course, when all the partners agreed, because that's based on the contract. Expiry for a fixed term partnership. What I mean by fixed term partnership? Partnership being based on a contract. So if your contract have expiry date with a fixed term, then if that contract expires, your partnership expires. So termination of a single venture when the partnership was being established for a specific purpose. That's something you will learn from contract law later. That's what we call one of the ways to terminate a contract. You have a contract to do one thing only. If that thing being done, that contract will be accomplished. So if you form a partnership to do one thing only, that thing accomplished, that partnership terminate, right? So ABC actually following the basic principle in contract law. Right? Because a contract is the root of a partnership. And then bankruptcy or death of a partner. I explained to you last time already. Well, when you're bankrupt, when you pass away, you are no longer possible to do anything as an agent, right? Remember, partner is an agent. If you are bankrupt, you are not having any capacity to work as an agent at all because you are not someone who can be trusted, right? Right? Think about why you are getting bankrupt. By court order, right? If someone sue you with a court order, of course, the solution of illegality, again, same principle as a contract law. If a contract will become illegal, sorry, a contract will become invalid if that contract pursuing for illegal purpose. Right? For example, you drop a contract to buy drugs, you have a contract to buy weapons, right? So that contract is not valid at all. And a principle, sorry, a partnership based on contract. So if you form a partnership based on a partnership agreement, and that partnership agreement pursuing for illegal purpose, then your partnership will also be illegal and to be terminated, right? So follow the contract law principle. So under what kind of situation that you can actually dissolve a partnership under court orders? Again, common sense law. So someone with an unsound mind or someone getting insane, being incapable to perform his part in the partnerships, because the partnerships always based on mutual cooperation. So if one of the partners is not actually capable to do the work, then you can dissolve the partnerships. For example, right, if you form partnerships with all the solicitors, and one of the solicitors being disqualified, right, it can be for professionals, then you can dissolve that partnerships. But this partnership is no longer capable to offer legal service, because you need to have a license, right? You need to have a license. A partnership has been engaging in activities which is prejudicial to the partnership. It means you are doing things that is harmful to the partnership at all, right? That is again the obligation of good faith to remember. As a partner, you need to have good faith, fiduciary duty. If you are willfully persistent breach of the partnership agreement, of course, because a partnership is based on a contract. So it means you breach your contract. You no longer have a partnership. Last point, the partnership can only be operated at a loss. Because the requirement of the partnership is what? Aim for a profit. Right? I'm not saying that you have to make a profit, but you have to aim for a profit. So if you're always making a loss, you're operating at loss, then that can be a reason that you apply for a court order to dissolve the partnership. All right? Okay, so that's all for today. See you on Saturday. Saturday evening, afternoon, right? Saturday afternoon. All right? So see you. So any question you want to ask me, you can talk to me.
disclose 咗同埋佢 approve 咗咪可以咯。如果人哋 approve 係可以嘅，如果你 disclose 人哋又話不可以嘅，就冇所謂嘅，即係你慳自己 interest， 但係你唔介意人哋慳你 interest， 冇問題。最緊要就係唔可以唔 disclose 同埋唔知嘅情況。所以係可以嘅，係啊，但應該係。有可能啊！如果佢真係即係成個 picture 係 full。你講監工執笠。